What happens when the perfect life is built on the perfect lie? For Linda Hayes, she had it all: a sprawling penthouse overlooking the city, a wardrobe filled with the finest couture, and a handsome, self-made millionaire husband, John, who adored her. With a diamond ring on her finger and a positive pregnancy test in her hand, she was living a fairy tale. But behind the doors of their gilded cage, a secret was festering, a betrayal so deep it wouldn't just break her heart. It would threaten to destroy an entire empire. This isn't a story about a cheating husband. This is the story of how a billionaire father orchestrated the most ruthless, calculated takedown in corporate history to save the one thing he couldn't buy his daughter's soul. Linda Hayes traced the delicate cursive of the invitation with a manicured finger. The Blackwood Foundation Annual Charity Gala. Her maiden name, Blackwood, felt like a relic from another life. For the past 3 years, she had been Mrs. John Hayes, and her world had been a whirlwind of bliss. Their life was the stuff of magazine features, a stunning, glass-walled penthouse in downtown Austin, Texas, a collection of sports cars gleaming in their private garage, and a social calendar that was the envy of the city's elite. John was by all accounts a modern-day Midas. The founder and CEO of Hayes Innovations, a boutique tech firm specializing in green energy logistics, he was lauded as a visionary. He had come from nothing, a scholarship kid from a rough neighborhood, and had built his empire through sheer grit and genius. That was the story he told, the story everyone believed, and Linda, more than anyone, championed it. She had met him at a university fundraiser, a brash, confident man, with eyes that saw right through her family's immense wealth and seemed to connect with her. He wasn't intimidated by her father, the legendary Julian Blackwood, a titan of industry, whose net worth was a matter of public speculation and private awe. John had treated her not as an heiress, but as a woman. "You're a million miles away." John's voice, smooth as single malt scotch, broke her reverie. He came up behind her, wrapping his strong arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. He smelled of expensive cologne and ambition. He kissed her neck softly, thinking about the gala. "Don't worry, my love. You'll be the most beautiful woman there, as always." Linda leaned back into his embrace, a contented sigh escaping her lips. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am." "We're lucky." He corrected his hand, moving to rest protectively on her still flat stomach. They had only found out a week ago. Pregnant. The word still sent a thrill of giddy terror through her. "Soon it'll be the 3 of us." She turned in his arms, her heart swelling with a love so profound it almost hurt. "I haven't told Dad yet. I want to tell him in person at the gala. I know how much he wants to be a grandfather." A flicker of something, was it apprehension, crossed John's face before it was replaced by his signature, charming smile. "Of course. Perfect timing. He'll be thrilled." Julian Blackwood was a complicated man. He adored Linda, his only child, with a fierce, almost primal devotion. But he was also a man who saw the world as a series of calculated risks and strategic moves. When Linda had first brought John home, Julian had been polite but distant. He'd run a background check, of course, a thorough one. It came back clean, painting a picture of a brilliant, hard-working young man who had pulled himself up by his bootstraps. "He's impressive, I'll give him that," Julian had conceded to Linda over dinner at his sprawling estate. "But remember, Bella, men who are hungry are never satisfied. Make sure his hunger is for you, not just for the world you represent." Linda had dismissed it as her father's overprotectiveness. She saw John's ambition not as a threat, but as a virtue. He wasn't using her. He was building a life with her. To prove it, her father had provided the seed money for Hayes Innovations, a generous but not astronomical loan. Julian had called it a wedding gift with interest. John had paid it back with that interest in less than 2 years. The move had earned him Julian's grudging respect, and from then on the two men maintained a cordial, if not warm, relationship. The night of the gala arrived a symphony of flashing camera bulbs and clinking champagne glasses. Linda was radiant in a custom Serafina gown of deep sapphire silk that hinted at the new life she carried. John was the picture of success in a tailored Tom Ford tuxedo, a 100 howls, $1,000 Richard Mille watch glinting on his wrist. "There's my girl," Julian Blackwood greeted them. His imposing frame softened by the proud smile on his face. He kissed Linda's cheek. "You look breathtaking." He nodded at John. "Hayes, your company's latest quarterly report was impressive. The Solaris contract was a masterful play." "Thank you, Julian," John said smoothly. "We've got a great team." Later in the evening, Linda pulled her father aside to a quiet balcony overlooking the city lights. With trembling hands and a voice thick with emotion, she told him, "Dad, I'm pregnant." For a moment, the titan of industry vanished. All she saw was her father. His eyes, usually sharp and analytical, welled with tears. He pulled her into a hug, his embrace fierce and protective. "Oh, Bella, that's the best news I've ever heard. The very best." When they rejoined John, Julian was beaming. He clapped a hand on John's shoulder, a rare gesture of genuine warmth. "You've made me a very happy man, John. A grandfather. I'm finally going to be a grandfather." As her father and husband spoke, Linda's eyes drifted across the ballroom. She saw John's chief operating officer, Aria Vance, standing near the bar. Aria was sharp, beautiful in a cold and angular way, and fiercely intelligent. She was John's right hand, the one he credited with much of the company's operational success. They were a dynamic team. But as Linda watched, she saw Aria raise her glass in a subtle, almost imperceptible toast in their direction. Her lips were curved into a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her gaze, fixed on John, was possessive proprietary. A tiny cold shiver traced a path down Linda's spine. She dismissed it instantly. It was the hormones, the grand emotion of the evening. It was nothing. She was the happiest woman in the world. She had everything a person could ever want, and she was about to lose it all. The weeks following the gala were a blur of morning sickness and nesting instincts. Linda poured her energy into designing the nursery, a sun-drenched room, painted in soft shades of celadon and cream. John was busier than ever. The Solaris contract had apparently opened up a floodgate of new opportunities. He was working late most nights, often flying out for last-minute meetings in Zurich or Singapore. "I'm sorry, my love," he'd murmur into the phone, his voice tired but exhilarated. "This is a crucial phase. It's all for us, for the baby. I'm building a legacy for our family." Linda wanted to believe him. She did believe him. But the little shiver of unease she'd felt at the gala had become a persistent, low-level hum of anxiety. He was distant even when he was home. His phone, which used to lie casually on the nightstand, was now perpetually face down or in his pocket. When she once picked it up to pass to him, he snatched it from her hand with a sharp, "I've got it," his reaction far more aggressive than the situation warranted. The first real crack appeared on a Tuesday. John was supposedly in a video conference in his home office. Linda was craving pickles and peanut butter, a cliché she found morbidly amusing. As she passed his office, the door slightly ajar. She heard his voice. It wasn't the commanding tone of a CEO. It was low, intimate, and laced with a warmth she hadn't heard directed at her in months. "No, of course, she doesn't suspect a thing," he was saying. "She's too busy picking out cribs. It's almost pathetic." A soft chuckle followed. "Patience, my love. Just a little longer. The final transfer from Blackwood's Overseas Asset Fund is the key. Once that's integrated, we're untouchable. Phase 2 is complete." Linda froze her hand, gripping the doorframe. Blackwood's Overseas Asset Fund. What was he talking about? Her father had investments everywhere, but John wasn't involved in managing them. "I know I miss you too." John's voice softened further. "This whole doting husband act is exhausting. But thinking about you, about our future, makes it all worth it. I'll see you tomorrow." The usual place. The click of the call ending was like a gunshot in the silent hallway. Linda's heart hammered against her ribs. The usual place. Who was he talking to? It had to be a misunderstanding. A business deal. The "my love" must have been a misinterpretation. But the contempt in his voice when he'd said, "She's too busy picking out cribs," was undeniable. It was aimed directly at her. She backed away from the door, her pickle craving replaced by a nauseating wave of dread. That night in bed, she lay beside him, the space between them feeling like a chasm. She watched the steady rise and fall of his chest and felt like she was lying next to a complete stranger. A few days later, a receipt from the high-end jeweler Cartier fell out of his briefcase as he was rushing out the door. "Can you grab that for me, honey?" he called over his shoulder. She picked it up. A love bracelet. White gold paved with diamonds. Her heart gave a hopeful leap. Was it a surprise for her? An apology for his distance, but the date on the receipt was from 2 weeks ago. He hadn't given her anything. She tucked the receipt into her purse, a cold knot forming in her stomach. Later that day, driven by a suspicion she hated to acknowledge, she did something she had never done before. She logged into their shared credit card account online. She scrolled through the statements, her eyes scanning for anything unusual. And there it was. A charge from the St. Regis Hotel, Monarch Suite, for over $2,000. It wasn't a business trip expense. Those went on the corporate card. This was personal. And it occurred every 2 weeks like clockwork. The latest charge was from the day after John's intimate phone call. The usual place. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture so ugly she couldn't bear to look at it. But she had to know. The final piece of the puzzle arrived via a courier. It was a sleek silver gift box addressed to John at their home address. It was from his office, so she thought nothing of it, placing it on his desk. That evening he came home late, looking tired. He saw the box and his expression tightened. "What's this? A delivery from your office?" she said, her voice carefully neutral. He opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a set of custom-made cufflinks. They were platinum, shaped like a bull and a bear, the symbols of the stock market. Engraved on the back of each was a tiny initial, an A. "They're beautiful," Linda said, her voice barely a whisper. "A gift from the board." John didn't look at her. Something like that. A token for the Solaris deal. He closed the box abruptly, but not before Linda saw the small gift card tucked inside. It was handwritten in a sharp and elegant script she recognized instantly from company memos. "To my king. For the empire we're building. All my love. A. Aria Vance." The hum of anxiety became a deafening roar. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. It wasn't just an affair. The phone call, the mention of her father's assets, the cufflinks, symbolizing a financial empire. This was something more. Something calculated and predatory. Her husband, the man she loved, the father of her unborn child, was not just betraying her. He was playing a game, and she and her family were the pawns. The knowledge was a poison seeping into every corner of her idyllic life. The beautiful penthouse felt like a prison. The designer clothes felt like a costume. The loving smiles John gave her felt like grotesque masks. For 3 days, Linda lived in a silent personal hell. She barely ate, slept, offered no escape, and the baby inside her felt less like a joy and more like a tether to a man she no longer knew. She had to be sure. Not just emotionally sure, but factually, irrefutably sure. She needed proof that was cold, hard, and undeniable. She thought about hiring a private investigator, but the idea of involving a stranger in this intimate betrayal felt cheap and degrading. She had to do it herself. She remembered the Cartier receipt, the bracelet. On a desperate hunch, she searched social media. She scrolled through Aria Vance's carefully curated Instagram feed, photos of business conferences, charity runs, and elegant dinners. And then she found it. A photo posted a week and a half ago. Aria at a rooftop bar with some colleagues, her left arm raised a champagne flute in her hand, and there, gleaming on her slender wrist, was a white gold Cartier love bracelet paved with diamonds. The caption read, "Celebrating a huge win. Some victories are sweeter than others." Feeling loved. The air rushed out of Linda's lungs. It was a brazen public declaration, a trophy. Aria wasn't just the other woman. She was a partner in crime, flaunting her prize. That was it. The final piece of denial crumbled away, replaced by a cold, hard rage. Her grief was still there, a massive, gaping wound in her chest, but the rage was a fire that cauterized it, giving her focus. She decided to confront him, not with screams or tears. That's what he would expect from the emotional, pregnant wife. She would confront him with facts. She waited until Thursday, the day she knew he had his bi-weekly meeting at the St. Regis. She booked a separate room on the same floor as the Monarch Suite, using her maiden name, Blackwood. She sat in the sterile, impersonal hotel room, the hours ticking by like a slow-motion countdown to an execution. At 7 p.m., she walked down the plushly carpeted hallway and stood before the suite. Her hand trembled as she raised it to knock. She didn't knock. Instead, using the master keycard she'd acquired from a hotel manager who owed her father a significant favor, she let herself in. The scene that greeted her was one of obscene domesticity. 2 champagne flutes on the coffee table, a woman's blazer, Aria's, draped over a chair, and from the bedroom she could hear their laughter. She walked to the bedroom doorway and stood there, a silent spectre at their feast. They were lying in bed, tangled in the sheets, watching television. John was shirtless, his arm draped around Aria, who was wearing one of his dress shirts. They looked comfortable, settled, like this was their reality, and Linda's home was the temporary stage. They didn't notice her at first, and then Aria's eyes flickered towards the door. Her laughter died in her throat. Her face went pale. She nudged John. John turned a lazy smile on his face that vanished the instant he saw her. He sat bolt upright, the sheets pooling around his waist. "Bella, what are you doing here?" Linda's voice was eerily calm, devoid of the hysteria he was clearly bracing for. "I believe the question is, what are you doing here, John?" He started to scramble for an excuse, his brain, usually so quick, seizing up. This isn't. It's a business meeting. Aria was feeling unwell. I was just... Stop. Linda's voice was sharp as shattered glass. Just stop lying. I'm so tired of your lies. She stepped into the room, her gaze sweeping over the scene with cold disgust. She looked at Aria, who was now clutching the sheet to her chest, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and defiance. The Cartier bracelet looks lovely on you, Aria, Linda said, her voice dripping with ice. A token for the Solaris deal, was it? Or was it for helping my husband systematically plan to defraud my father? John's face went white. This was not the simple discovery of an affair he might have been able to manage. Bella, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, she retorted, taking another step forward. I understand the late nights, the business trips, the hushed phone calls. I understand the plan to leverage Blackwood's overseas asset fund. What is phase 2? John, is that when you finally drain enough of my family's money that you don't need the pregnant wife anymore. The color drained from his face. He was utterly exposed. The charming mask fell away, and for the first time, Linda saw the real John Hayes. There was no remorse in his eyes, no shame, only cold, hard fury at being caught. So you figured it out, he sneered, his voice turning ugly. The poor little rich girl finally put 2 and 2 together. What are you going to do? Run crying to Daddy? Aria, seeing her chance, found her voice. Frankly, Linda, you should be thanking me. I'm the one who made this company what it is. I'm the brains behind the strategy. John brought the access and I brought the talent. You just brought the bank account. The cruelty of their words was a physical blow, but the rage inside Linda burned brighter. The bank account you seem so desperate to get your hands on. Linda said, her eyes locking onto John's. You came into my life with nothing. I loved you. I believed in you. I defended you to my own father. I am carrying your child. A child that secures the dynasty. John shot back, his voice venomous. An heir. It's a role you were born to play, Linda. Don't act so surprised that this was always a transaction. A transaction. That single word shattered the last vestiges of love she had for him. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a negation of their entire life together. Their love, their marriage, their future family. It had all been a lie, a business deal where she was the only one who didn't know the terms. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply turned her back on them. As she walked out of the room, her spine straight and her head held high, she said, You are right about one thing, John. I am going to run to my daddy, and you have absolutely no idea what you've just unleashed. She closed the door to the monarch suite behind her, leaving the ruins of her marriage in her wake. The unveiling was complete. Now the reckoning would begin. The drive from Austin to her father's estate in the hill country was a blur of rain-streaked highways and tear-filled eyes. Linda drove on autopilot, the conversation from the hotel room playing on a torturous loop in her mind. A transaction. It was always a transaction. The words were acid, eating away at the foundations of her reality. She arrived at the sprawling limestone gates of the Blackwood estate well after midnight. The security chief, a man who had known her since she was a little girl, let her through without a word, his concerned expression saying everything. She parked the car and walked into the grand, silent house. A single light was on in her father's study. Julian Blackwood was sitting in his large leather chair, a glass of amber liquid untouched on the table beside him. He looked up as she entered, and the book he was reading fell to the floor. His face, usually a mask of control, crumpled with worry at the sight of her. She was pale, her eyes red and swollen, her sapphire gala dress now looking like a sad, wrinkled costume from a life that had ended hours ago. She didn't have to say a word. He stood up and wrapped his arms around her, and the dam of her composure finally broke. She sobbed into his chest, great shuddering gasps of grief and rage, mourning the man she thought she had married and the life she thought she had built. Julian just held her, stroking her hair, murmuring soothing words until the storm of her tears began to subside. "Tell me everything," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. And so she did. She told him everything. The phone call, the receipt, the hotel statements, the cufflinks, the brutal confrontation in the hotel room. She repeated John and Arya's words, their contempt, their admission of a larger plan involving his assets. As she spoke, she watched a transformation occur in her father. The concerned parent receded, and the ruthless architect of a global empire emerged. His eyes turned to steel. The lines on his face hardened. He listened without interruption, his hands steepled before him, his focus absolute. When she was finished, the room was silent for a long moment. "I see," he said finally, his voice unnervingly calm. "He has underestimated us. He has mistaken my love for you as a weakness he could exploit. He is about to learn that my love for you is in fact the most dangerous weapon in my arsenal." He stood and walked over to a large antique globe that stood in the corner of his study. He gave it a slow spin. "John Hayes," Julian began, his voice taking on a clinical, detached tone, like a surgeon discussing an impending operation. "A brilliant operator, charismatic, ambitious. I saw all that. I also saw the chip on his shoulder, the deep-seated insecurity of a man desperate to prove he belongs. I thought your love would be enough to temper that. I was wrong." He turned to face her. "Bella, there is something you need to know. When John came to me for the seed money for Hayes Innovations, I didn't just give him a loan." Linda looked at him confused. "What do you mean? I never give a simple loan. I create a system of checks and balances. The initial capital wasn't a direct wire from my primary bank. It was funneled through 3 separate offshore holding companies controlled by Blackwood Capital. The patents for his proprietary green energy software, they were developed by a tech incubator I own in Palo Alto. I licensed them to him exclusively through a 4th shell corporation, the Solaris contract that made him a star. The chairman of Solaris is an old friend from my days at Wharton. I made a call. I opened the door for him." Linda stared at her father, her mind struggling to process the implications. "But he paid back the loan, with interest." A grim smile touched Julian's lips. "Yes, he did. He paid my money back to me. With my money. He thinks he built an empire, Bella. But he didn't. He built a beautiful, intricate cage, and he never once thought to check who was holding the key. Every dollar he's ever made, every contract he's ever signed, every asset he possesses is inextricably tied to me. I designed it that way. It was a test, a long, elaborate test of his character. And tonight, he has given me the final results. He has failed spectacularly." Linda felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. The self-made millionaire, the visionary who had built his company from scratch, it was all an illusion, a carefully constructed narrative, authored and directed by her father. So when he talks about Phase 2 and integrating my overseas assets, she began, he is referring to a final investment tranche I was preparing to make. Julian finished for her. A show of faith, the last step that would have given him significant untethered capital. It would have been the first part of his company that was truly his own. The transfer was scheduled for Monday morning. He walked over to his desk and picked up the phone, dialing his chief legal counsel. "David, it's Julian. I need you on a secure line in 5 minutes. We are initiating the protocol Scorched Earth. Yes, that one. Alert the board of Blackwood Capital. I want a full asset recall on the Hayes Innovations portfolio. Activate every penalty clause in every contract we hold. I want him dismantled. No, not by the end of the week. By sunrise." He hung up the phone and looked at his daughter, his eyes softening once more. "He took your heart," Julian said, his voice low and firm. "So I am going to take everything else. He will wake up tomorrow morning a millionaire on paper. By the time he has his morning coffee, he will be so far in debt, he won't even own the watch on his wrist. This isn't just business, Bella. This is a reckoning." Linda watched her father, the master of his universe, set his plan into motion. The grief was still there, a heavy stone in her chest. But for the first time that night, she felt a flicker of something else. Not hope, not yet, but a sense of righteous biblical justice. The retreat was over. The storm was about to break. While Linda slept exhausted in her childhood bedroom, Julian Blackwood's corporate empire moved with the silent, lethal efficiency of a predator. The sun had not yet risen over the Texas hills, but on trading floors in Tokyo and London, the first tremors were already being felt. Julian was not just a billionaire. He was an architect of systems, a man who understood that true power wasn't in owning things, but in controlling the invisible structures that held them up. The first move was the simplest, the final investment tranche. The $50 million in untethered capital John was expecting on Monday was cancelled. An email, cold and formal, was sent from a Blackwood Capital subsidiary, citing a fundamental breach of investor confidence. Simultaneously, in a data center in Delaware, lawyers for one of Julian's holding companies filed a motion to revoke the exclusive license for the green energy logistics software, the very heart of Hayes Innovations. The contract, which John had signed without a second thought years ago, contained a morality clause, Clause 27B. It stipulated that any action by the CEO that could bring disrepute or significant personal scandal upon the technology's original patent holder would render the agreement null and void. The clause was obscure, buried deep in legalese, and designed for precisely this kind of betrayal. Without the license, Hayes Innovations was nothing more than a brand name with expensive office furniture. The third and most devastating move targeted John's personal wealth. The seed money he had paid back was technically a convertible note. Upon evidence of gross mismanagement or fraud, a term Julian's lawyers were now prepared to argue, included the commingling of corporate funds for personal affairs, like hotel suites and lavish gifts for his mistress. The note could be converted into a majority equity stake in Hayes Innovations. At 4:15 a.m. Central Time, Blackwood Capital exercised that option. In an instant, Julian Blackwood went from a silent backer to the 51% majority shareholder. Meanwhile, John and Aria were celebrating. After Linda's dramatic exit, their initial shock had morphed into a strange sense of exhilaration. The secret was out. The pretense was over. "She'll try to make things difficult," Aria said, sipping champagne in the hotel suite. "Her father will posture, maybe try to pull some funding." John scoffed, feeling invincible. "Let him. The company is too successful now. He's a businessman. He won't kill a golden goose just to spite me." And besides, I control the board. I control the tech. What can he really do? This just accelerates our timeline. We push for a divorce. I give her a generous settlement. And in a year, this is all just a bad memory. We'll be on a yacht in Monaco, and she'll be at home with the baby and her father's checkbook. He felt a surge of triumph. He had done it. He had outplayed the great Julian Blackwood, won the game, and gotten the girl he really wanted. He was the master of his own destiny. His phone buzzed at 6:00 a.m. It was his CFO, Richard. John answered, still flushed with victory. "Richard, it's early." "John, we have a problem." Richard's voice was panicked. "A big one. The Series C funding from the Blackwood sub-fund. It's been pulled. I just got the wire rejection notice." John sat up. "What? That's impossible." The deal was locked. And that's not all. Richard continued, his voice trembling. "I just got a notification from our legal department. We've received a cease and desist. It's regarding our core software patent. They're revoking our license, effective immediately." The blood drained from John's face. "Revoking? They can't do that." "They can, John. There was a morality clause, and... Oh God, John, the initial seed investment. It was a convertible note. They've just exercised their option. Blackwood Capital now owns 51% of Hayes Innovations." John dropped the phone. The room started to spin. The golden goose wasn't just being killed. It was being dissected with surgical precision. He had never owned it at all. Arya looked at him, her confident smirk faltering. "John, what is it? What's wrong?" He couldn't speak. He just stared at her, the horrifying reality crashing down on him. Every triumph, every success, every dollar he had ever made was a gift from the man he had just betrayed. And the gift was being taken back. The final blow came not from a lawyer, but from the valet at the St. Regis. When John, shell-shocked and desperate, tried to leave, he was stopped at the front drive. His custom black Ferrari, a symbol of his self-made status, was being hitched to a tow truck. "Sorry, Mr. Hayes," the valet said, avoiding eye contact. "The car is registered to a corporate leasing company. They just sent a repossession order. Said you missed a payment." John stared at the car, his car being towed away, like common scrap. It wasn't just an asset being seized. It was his identity being dismantled piece by piece, in public. He finally understood. Julian Blackwood wasn't posturing. He wasn't negotiating. He was erasing him. The speed of the collapse was breathtaking. What took John Hayes years to build, Julian Blackwood dismantled in less than 3 hours. By 9:00 a.m., when the New York Stock Exchange opened, the name John Hayes was already poisoned. An emergency board meeting for Hayes Innovations was called for 10:00 a.m. John, still technically the CEO, raced to the gleaming downtown office tower, his mind a maelstrom of denial and rage. He was locked out. His keycard flashed red. Access denied. When he tried to argue with the security guard in the lobby, 2 stern-faced men in dark suits appeared and informed him that as per the new majority shareholders' directive, he was not permitted on the premises. He stood on the sidewalk, humiliated, as the employees he had hired, mentored, and ruled over, walked past him, their eyes averted, whispering amongst themselves. He called Arya. "They've locked me out," he yelled into the phone. "They can't do this. John, it's over." Arya's voice was cold, pragmatic. The we and us from the night before had vanished. "I just got a call from Julian Blackwood's legal team. They're dissolving the company and absorbing the viable assets, including the Solaris contract, into a new subsidiary of Blackwood Capital." They offered me a position, a very generous one. John was stunned into silence. You're taking it. I'm a businesswoman, John. I built the operational strategy for this company. That has value. Your value was your connection to the Blackwoods. You severed that connection. You have nothing left to offer. After everything, he sputtered. We did this together. No, she corrected him, her voice utterly devoid of emotion. You used Linda. I used you. The difference is my benefactor is still solvent. I'm sorry, John. This is just business. She hung up. The betrayal from Arya was, in its own way, as profound as the one he had inflicted on Linda. He had believed they were partners, a power couple ready to take on the world. He now realized he was just a stepping stone for her, too. His phone buzzed again. It was his private banker from J.P. Morgan Chase. Mr. Hayes, I'm calling to inform you that your personal and investment accounts have been frozen. The banker said, his tone formal and regretful. A lien has been placed on all your assets by Blackwood Capital to cover outstanding debts and penalties related to the dissolution of your partnership agreement. I'm afraid your balance is now significantly negative. The world tilted. The Richard Mille watch on his wrist suddenly felt like a lead weight. He had bought it on credit leveraged against his now non-existent stock portfolio. The Tom Ford suit felt like a costume for a part he was no longer playing. The penthouse, the cars, the accounts, it was all gone. Not just gone, but replaced by a mountain of debt so high he would never climb out from under it. He wandered the streets of Austin in a daze. The city he had once considered his kingdom now felt alien and hostile. Every skyscraper seemed to mock him, a testament to a world of wealth and power he had only been renting. He was a ghost haunting the edges of a life that was no longer his. By noon, the story had been strategically leaked to the financial press. Tech wunderkind John Hayes ousted from own company in hostile takeover by father-in-law Julian Blackwood. The articles painted a picture of a reckless, fraudulent CEO whose personal indiscretions had led to his downfall. His carefully crafted image as a self-made visionary was shattered, replaced by the reality he was a kept man who had bitten the hand that fed him. Desperate and broken, he ended up outside the gates of the Blackwood estate. He buzzed the intercom again and again. "I need to speak to Linda," he yelled. "Please, I need to talk to my wife." The calm, dispassionate voice of the security chief came over the speaker. "Mrs. Hayes does not wish to see you, sir. You are trespassing on private property. Please leave, or we will be forced to notify the authorities." The gate remained shut, a solid, impenetrable barrier. He was locked out of her life as surely as he had been locked out of his office. He had mistaken her quiet strength for weakness, her love for naivety. He had seen her father's wealth as a resource to be plundered, not a fortress to be respected. And now that fortress had cast him out into the cold, leaving him with nothing but the bitter taste of his own arrogance. The collapse was total. He was not just ruined, he had been unmade. A week later, Linda agreed to see him, not at the estate, and certainly not at their former home. The meeting was set for a neutral location, the empty boardroom of a downtown law firm owned by her father. The setting was deliberate, sterile, impersonal, and transactional. Linda walked in, not as the heartbroken wife, but as the daughter of Julian Blackwood. She wore a simple but elegant maternity dress, her hand often resting on her stomach. She was flanked by her father and his chief legal counsel, David. She looked at John, and for the first time, felt nothing. No love, no hate, just a vast, empty space where her heart used to be. John looked like a man hollowed out. He was wearing an off-the-rack suit that hung loosely on his frame. He had lost weight, and his eyes were shadowed with exhaustion and desperation. He sat alone on the other side of the vast mahogany table. "Bella," he began, his voice hoarse. "I am so sorry. I made a terrible mistake. I was arrogant. I was stupid." Julian Blackwood held up a hand, silencing him. "Mr. Hayes, you are not on here to apologize. Apologies are for mistakes. What you engaged in was a calculated multi-year campaign of deception and attempted fraud. We are here to discuss the terms of your departure from my daughter's life." David the lawyer slid a thick stack of papers across the table. "This is a divorce settlement and a non-disclosure agreement. You will sign it. In it, you will relinquish all claims to any marital assets, which, as you know, are now non-existent. You will also relinquish all parental rights to the unborn child." John stared at the papers, then at Linda, his eyes pleading. "Parental rights, Bella, no. It's my child, our child. You can't do that." It was Linda who spoke, her voice clear and steady, imbued with a strength she didn't know she possessed. "You called our child a transaction, John. An heir to secure a dynasty you were trying to steal. This child will not be a pawn in your games. This child will be a Blackwood. It will know love, honesty, and integrity. It will know nothing of you." "I'll fight it," he threatened, a flicker of his old arrogance returning. "Fight it with what?" Julian asked coolly. "You have no money. You have no job. You have no credibility. We, on the other hand, have documented evidence of felony-level wire fraud, corporate espionage, and embezzlement. We have a sworn affidavit from Ms. Vance detailing your entire plan. She was quite forthcoming in exchange for immunity and a severance package. If you contest this, we will not hesitate to pursue full criminal charges. You will spend the next 20 years in a federal prison. Sign the papers, John. It is the only move you have left." Defeated John picked up the pen. His hand shook as he signed away his marriage, his fortune, and his child. He was no longer John Hayes, the tech visionary. He was a ghost, a cautionary tale whispered in the boardrooms and country clubs he once frequented. As he was escorted out, a broken man, Linda stood by the window looking down at the city. Her father came to stand beside her. "It's over," he said gently. "A new beginning." She whispered, her hand on her belly. She had walked through fire, but she had not been consumed. The betrayal had broken her heart, but it had not broken her spirit. It had forged her into something stronger, something wiser. She was no longer just the sheltered heiress. She was a survivor, a mother, a Blackwood ready to build a new life, a true legacy for her child on the ashes of her husband's lies. The gilded cage was gone, and in its place was a future she would build for herself, one based not on a fairy tale, but on the unbreakable strength of a love that was real. 7 months passed. The Texas winter gave way to a burgeoning spring, and with it the promise of new life. Linda had moved back to the Blackwood estate, but not into her childhood bedroom. She had taken over the West Wing, a sprawling suite of rooms she had redesigned herself. The cold, minimalist aesthetic she and John had favored was gone, replaced by warm woods, soft fabrics, and shelves filled with books on art history and philanthropy. The penthouse, stripped of their personal belongings, had been sold in a private off-market deal, its existence scrubbed from her life like a bad dream. Linda, now in the final weeks of her pregnancy, was not idle. She had taken an active executive role in the Blackwood Foundation, the charitable arm of her father's empire. The woman who once spent her days at luncheons and gallery openings now spent them poring over grant proposals for pediatric hospitals and educational startups. The betrayal had awakened a part of her she never knew existed. Her father's sharp intellect and an insatiable desire to build something meaningful, something real. One afternoon, her driver was taking her back from a meeting in the city. A sudden downpour had snarled traffic, forcing them to take a detour through a less glamorous part of town. As they waited at a red light, Linda's gaze drifted to the entrance of a mid-range hotel, its porte cochere offering scant protection from the driving rain. A valet, in a cheap, ill-fitting red jacket, was jogging towards an arriving car. He slipped on the wet pavement, catching himself before he fell, a look of weary frustration on his face. As he straightened up, the light from a street lamp illuminated his features. It was John. The change was shocking. The razor-sharp ambition in his eyes had been replaced by a dull, hollowed-out resignation. His designer suits were gone. His expensive watch was gone. His confidence was gone. He was just a man in a cheap uniform, working for tips in the rain. As he took the keys from the driver, his eyes flickered towards the street, and for a brief, horrifying moment, they met Linda's through the tinted window of her Rolls-Royce. Recognition dawned, followed by a wave of profound, soul-crushing shame. He looked away instantly, his shoulders slumping, a ghost haunted by the life he had thrown away. Linda felt a single cold pang, not of pity but of closure. He was no longer a monster in her memory. He was just a small, sad man. As for Aria Vance, her fate was a different kind of prison. Julian, in a move of cold pragmatism, had kept his word. She was given a senior position at the new Blackwood Capital subsidiary that absorbed Hayes Innovations' assets. She had her high salary, her corner office, her title. But she had no power. She was watched, her every decision scrutinized. She was a brilliant mind in a gilded cage, forever marked as disloyal, a tool to be used, but never trusted. Her ambition had won her a seat at the table, but she would never be allowed to forget that she was dining on scraps forever, in the shadow of the man she helped John try to destroy. Later that evening, Linda was in her father's study, a cup of chamomile tea in her hands, as they discussed a new wing for the Austin Children's Hospital the foundation was funding. "The architects sent the final schematics," Julian said, passing a tablet to her. "Your notes on natural light integration were brilliant. They've incorporated all of it." "It's for the children," Linda said softly. "They deserve to have a place that feels hopeful." Julian looked at his daughter, his heart swelling with a pride that was deeper than any business deal he had ever closed. He saw the woman she had become, resilient, intelligent, and compassionate. The ordeal had stripped away her naivety, but had revealed a core of pure steel. "You've found your calling, Bella," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are more than just my heir. You are my partner. This foundation, this legacy, it's yours now to shape and grow. I'm building a world I want my son to be proud of." She replied, her hand resting on the curve of her stomach. "A world where strength is measured by kindness and success is measured by what you give, not what you take." 2 weeks later, the call came in the middle of the night. The birth was long and difficult, a final crucible of pain before the dawn. But as the first rays of morning light streamed into the hospital room, a new life entered the world with a strong, healthy cry. The nurse placed the baby boy in Linda's arms. He was perfect. He had her dark hair, and when he finally opened his eyes, they were the same sharp, intelligent blue as her father's. Julian stood by the bedside, the imposing titan of industry, completely undone, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his grandson. "Have you thought of a name?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Linda looked down at the tiny, perfect face of her son, a wave of love so fierce and protective washing over her that it left her breathless. This was her purpose. This was her future. This was her victory. "His name is Leo," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Leo Julian Blackwood. A lion for the fight he has in him. And Julian for the man who taught me how to win." In the end, John Hayes didn't just lose his fortune. He lost his identity, erased by the very power he sought to control. Linda, forged in the fires of betrayal, emerged not as a victim, but as a matriarch in the making, ready to protect her child and her family's true legacy. Her story is a powerful, gut-wrenching reminder that integrity is the one currency that can't be bought, and that the fiercest love is often the most dangerous weapon. If this story of resilience, justice, and the ultimate triumph of family resonated with you, please show your support by hitting that like button and sharing this video with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss our next story. And now, we want to hear from you. What would you have done in Linda's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for listening.